Welcome to Reiki Cafe Radio. I'm your host, Christine Renee, and I'm bringing a good friend and colleague on, Bruce Taylor. Today, he is, I love all the things that you're doing with Roots of Life. This is his Reiki business, but he's also a geek like me when it comes to Reiki history, and we really like to geek out on all of the things of what was Usui's life back in the day. And part of it was my own spiritual development, Reiki development, because I went on his Reiki pilgrimage last May, and he's doing it again. And this time it looks even better. I'm so jealous because I'm going to Ecuador. I can't make it, but this pilgrimage looks phenomenal. And so I wanted to bring Bruce on because we're going to geek out over the next 45 minutes about all of the things around Usui and Shugendo and Buddhist esoteric world, and really kind of help you guys realize and expand our view of what we normally get in a Reiki level 1 class of going, this is what it was actually like back in the late 1800s. And so that we can have context to the history, because I think that is so important. So welcome to the show, Bruce. So glad to have you on again. Fill us into, tell us, our listeners, a little bit about who you are, so that, because I could fill it in, but I think your words is so much clearer, because what you're doing is fantastic. I love all the things.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be back, Christine, as always. Nice to be here. And, we've been chatting about these topics for years, so it's always a pleasure. Yeah, my name is Bruce Taylor. My home on the internet is rootsoflife.org. I am a Reiki practitioner and teacher, among other things, plant medicine, meditation, and so on. And, my main kind of archetype is a teacher. I've always been a teacher. Prior to going into holistic work, I was a secondary school teacher focusing on the sciences, human sciences, physical sciences, and philosophy and things like that. So this is kind of a natural transition for me to really focus on the teaching and the passing of this information from teacher to student, so they can hopefully become really confident and strong teachers themselves. And so that's what has led me to want to push as far as I can into the origin story of Usui Reiki Roho, which is a very beautiful story, right? It's a very beautiful personal story. I don't mean for me, I mean for all of us, because we all walk a very similar path once we get away from the intro to Reiki, which is kind of the idea that we're healing or that we're doing hands-on work or whatever. There's layers that go further than that, and healing and all of the hands-on work still takes place, but there's a huge story below all of that, right? That I think is very, very interesting.
Yeah. And I get, I don't think disgruntled, I think that's too strong, but I get a little annoyed that our history isn't as in depth as I want it to be. But regardless of what Reiki history book you pick up, it's like, no, tell me about Japan. And I really didn't quite understand until I got my feet on the ground, landed in Japan, and go, oh my goodness, the culture differentiation is so wide, so vast, that it's no wonder that in the West we do things a lot differently, and it's not bad. People know me well enough. I'm very much into mixing modalities and leaning into your intuition and developing our spiritual gifts and all of that. And I really love to understand what was it like in Sensei Usui's time, because it gives us the context of why did he go up to the mountain of Mount Kurama? Why did he seek out these spiritual revelations? And I love that you have kind of committed a good portion of your career just to going down that rabbit hole. And I think the only way you really can is the time that you have spent in Japan on the ground and meeting with these different Buddhist priests of the mountains and Reiki practitioners and teachers and all of the things. So one, I commend you of that commitment. I wish I could tag along more often. And I'm curious, what really kind of started you down the rabbit hole of the Shugendo aspect. So if you want to explain what Shugendo is and how you kind of started connecting the dots between Usui Reiki Roho and Shugendo, I'm curious, how did that happen?
Yeah, so there's this mystic practice, and I mean mystic because it's kind of a dying practice currently in Japan. So, like Christine, you remember we on the tour, our first stop was at Shogo-in Temple in Kyoto, and we met the son of the head priest. And so remember, we had that private tour around the temple, and that's the main temple of the practice of Shugendo in Kyoto. And so this idea of the numbers of practitioners kind of waning relatively quickly, this is who I'm getting it from. So it's right from kind of the source, right? So it's not hearsay and conjecture, and this is what they're telling me. And Shugendo is a practice of mountain asceticism. Shugendo, the practitioners are called the Yamabushi, and the Yamabushi are people who are going out into the mountain. This practice is about it's kind of translated into lying with the mountain or lying in the mountain. And it's an act of performing aesthetic practices in the mountain. So you can read that kind of in general as to facing yourself in the elements of nature. Right. So you are going out, and asceticism can mean a number of different things here. It might mean long duration meditation. It might mean fasting, hiking. It might mean acts of courage in the wilderness. It could mean that you are doing meditations under a cold waterfall and trying to maintain a comfortable, quasi-comfortable heart rate, breathing pattern, trying to stay calm in the storm,
Yes.
essentially. And that's kind of the thread that ties all of this together. We have to learn to stay calm in the storm of the self. So, if you go into the wilderness fasting, for instance, then, hiking up a mountain is going to be many times more difficult than somebody who is not fasting. So you might feel weak, you might feel all these things or whatever. And in those moments of perceived weakness is when our true self, or the attachments of our true self, come to the surface, right? And so in many ways, this is what the Shugen practitioners are aiming towards. They're working to try to find the resistance in the self and to make peace with it. And by not making peace with it means to let go of it, right?
Yes.
To not hold on to it anymore. So, when we were on Mount Kurama, and this is why I love going there, and I do a lot of practice at night there on my own. When I'm there, I go there quite often. I don't know how many times I've been up the mountain now, because I go there to Japan quite often, but every time that I'm there, and at night in particular, and when I'm by myself and I'm meditating back in the forest or whatever, there's always these little spooks and startles, or that it's getting too cold, or it's too wet, or it's too this, or it's too that. They're all excuses that I have in my body and my mind to not do the practice. And if I can push past that just a little bit, then the grander story or the grander narrative of the self comes forward. This is much the same, by the way, as like if you're training for a marathon and you just don't want to run another mile. In that last mile is where your truth comes out.
Yes.
You supersede your weakness and you find your truth, right? So, I'm conscious of the time because we could talk about this for hours and hours, but on Mount Kurama, there's a number of deities and there's a number of lesser deities. And some of these that are that caught my attention from the beginning are the Tengu and Sojobo. And I know you've probably talked about this on your podcasts and things before. The Tengu are essentially like these mysterious and mischievous creatures in the forest that will trick you and try to deceive you. So imagine that you're seated in meditation, and you feel a little bit of fear because you're in the forest, you don't really know where you are, it's dark, it's all these types of things, right? Naturally, fear will come up in our body. It might be from childhood something, it might be because you heard a stick break in the woods because a deer just walked past or whatever. That's the Tengu. And so the idea is when you feel that fear or that whatever, that attachment rising through the body, are you able to become more and more still in that experience? And if you can, then that's you actively releasing that fear or belief or memory or whatever it might be. And after you release a number of these things, then the idea with the Tengu is that, and with Sojobo, this is like the biggest of your fear. Like you can face your biggest fear. And when you do, and you sit comfortably and quietly in that storm, then you're granted the powers of the Tengu, which can be things like healing or shape-shifting or swordsmanship. And all of these things are very specific to Usui's time, right? So I'm not saying that this is like a complete list. It would really be whatever you need to find for your moment of satori or your
Oh, it's
moment of
so
enlightenment.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
so you face yourself, you go through your fears. This is like, and I think I said this on the tour, this is the pretty much the exact same story in Empire Strikes Back. At the beginning, when Luke is trying to learn from Yoda, remember they're practicing asceticism in the kind of swampy, I can't remember the name of the planet, but and then Yoda is like, you need to go in the cave now and face yourself. And for people listening, and maybe you remember this, Christine, I don't know, but Luke naively takes his weapons with him.
Right.
And he straps his belt around it. And Yoda's like, you don't need your weapons because your weapons are just attachment. That's your weakness. So let go of it. Just face yourself. And he does. He faces Darth Vader only to find that it's himself. And
Yes.
he gets his truth, right?
It's so funny because I just was recently watching one of the Star Wars movies, and I'm sitting there with my son, and I'm like, oh yeah, we talk about in that Reiki, and oh yeah, we talk about, like, you just see all those things.
Yep.
And I remember my very first Reiki teacher was like, you find the truth in Star Wars. Like, it was part of my Reiki education, like 20 years ago, right? And I love that it continuously comes up. And just to give people a framework for some of this conversation, over when Shugendo was at its height, there was 15,000 temples in Shugendoism, right? And then in the late 1800s, there was things going on politically that was trying to separate Buddhism out, and the temple numbers reduced to 500 Shugendo temples by the end of the 1800s. And then now today there's only 150. And so the temple that Bruce is referring to, the one that we visited on the pilgrimage, is just one of 150. And so it was at its height, like, this was the very well-known practice. And to keep in mind that, when we speak about the Shugendo, this is a mixture of folk religion, Northern shamanism, Taoism, esoteric Buddhism, as well as Shintoism. And then you have the practice, and the Yamabushi's main goal is supernatural powers through ascetic practices in the mountains. To return from this state, these shaman priests provide prayer rituals, including those for healing and exorcism. Now, that is a quote just off of a plaque that you can find at the World Heritage Pilgrimage site just south of Kyoto, that's dedicated to the World Heritage Pilgrimage. This is the sister Buddhist trail to the one in Santiago. And so I just love how, when I read that, it was like, aha, brilliant light bulb moments going, this literally sounds like what Usui was doing. And so I went on this pilgrimage trail right after the pilgrimage with Bruce's last trip. And it just was like, I understood everything in this museum because of what I learned with Bruce on the pilgrimage. And it just was like, connect the dots, connect the dots, connect the dots. And it makes so much sense to me that we can say, I'm curious if Usui Sensei was a Yamabuchi. Was he one of these shaman priests that was going up to the mountains to practice mountain asceticism? We know he was up there for 21 days meditating.
That's mountain asceticism, right? That's it.
Fasting, right. Like, here we go. Like, of course. And what we hear, that he was trying to gain these supernatural healing powers. And so it literally was on this plaque, and I was like, oh, like, of course, this is amazing. And then I'm just like, I just want to go back to that original temple on our pilgrimage that we went to, where I'm like, I just want to sit at the temple and hang out with these priests and learn about, Fudumyo and all the deities of Mount Kurama, because this kind of sets the scene of what Usui was actually doing during the time in which he was doing it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing about this, and I just want to say this, I'm very conscious that a lot of people might not have heard of this before. When these kind of supernatural powers are being talked about, like this ability to heal by touch, or to see in the dark, or to shapeshift. What's the other one? I mean, there's Yatsuni, which is a very famous real samurai warrior in general, who apparently trained in very similar fashion on Mount Kurama and became a very skilled swordsman. To me, what that really means is this: if I drop via my practice and via my turning into the self, if I drop the idea of Bruce and anything that comes through me, if I'm free as free as I can possibly be of those attachments. So that means dropping Usui Sensei, that means dropping Reiki, it means dropping everything and just being in as neutral of a state as I can possibly be. Well, then I think the mystical power is you recognize that what is there to actually heal. You know what I mean? Like, we get information from animals, we get information from the trees, we get information from the deities, we get all of these things that stream through us when we let go of our own identity of the self. And I think the asceticism point here is, in reality, it's a way to purify the mind, which means when these things are coming through us, are we able to resist the temptation of attachment? And that's the only way we can learn. This is clearly shown on Mount Kurama. If you let, this is the power symbol right in front of the main temple, and we talked about this extensively, right? That power symbol, you know, I'll just kind of very quickly explain it. It's kind of like a flower. Imagine like petals of a flower that touch a triangle in the middle. So in the very middle of this power symbol, you've got a triangle that's pointing towards the temple. And there's 6 points of contact on that triangle. Those 6 points of contact represent the form and the attachment of the self. So things like sight, mind, body, thought, smell, and hearing, and so on. If we can let go of all of those, then we become the triangle. And the triangle are the main 3 deities of Mount Kurama, which is like the triple diamond system. If we can let go of those, then you recognize a moment of union with the head deity of Mount Kurama, which is Son-ten. And 10 means heaven, right? And so this idea of Son-ten means that you are the light of heaven. So you can't be the light of heaven if you believe that you're Bruce Taylor. You know what I mean? Because then I'm immediately back into my egotistical body. So you can feel these things moving through you, and you can witness them, and you can be with them. But as soon as it becomes contextualized, then you're out of that flow. And that's the tricky thing, because we all contextualize it almost immediately.
Right. Right. Well, I think
that's why we need to practice asceticism.
Right. I think that's it right now. Like, so many Westerners need to understand the story. And I mean, hence we're both geeking out on the story right now. Like, I totally get that. And when we can come to that place, and I love that mandala that sits out in front of the temple, which Bruce is just speaking about. You stand on that triangle, and it's right over a vortex, and you can feel the energy. And then when you understand, what does this represent? We can understand that when we stand here, we are in a place of fully shedding. Like, I remember one of our pilgrim goers last tour, and she was looking at Inamoto Sensei going, should I get off now? Like, she was concerned that she was taking up too much time. Mm-hmm. And he was like, no, stay, breathe, feel, and just encourage, like, don't get off of it yet. Just be present, because that's the whole point, is to let go of our thoughts, let go of our ego, let go of our identity of who we think we are, and just be present in that vortex with those 3 deity, releasing the sensory, and just be here now. And it's just a hot spot right on top of that Mount Kurama. It's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's completely amazing, right? And you know, this speaks, I think, to it's to the journey that, or the natural evolution that Western Reiki at some point has to go through, regardless of what people believe or how they're learning it or whatever. It has to go through this. The journey is, we have to recognize at some point that any belief during a session is our form of attachment. Anything that we do. So like in Japan, and Christine, you were there, remember when we did the Reiki share? You simply place your hands on, you scan the Boyo-san, that's fine, but you're not doing it from a judgment or whatever. When you feel it, you place your hands there and you let go.
Right.
I heard a really profoundly beautiful thing in one of the Reiki shares. I don't know if it was on that pilgrimage. I think it was after we had finished. I think it was the last one that I was at, or the second to last one. And Inamoto leaned over to one of the senior Shions at Komyo Reikido, and he reminded him very quietly, but he said it in English. And I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure I was meant to hear that. He said, we never receive, we only give. And so if you remember, Inamoto never gets on the table, and the senior Shians never get on the table. And I was thinking about this, and it's because of this idea that if we get on the table, then we're attaching. I need something. But why do you need something? Because you're attaching to your story. Well, what if you let go of your story? Then that means that if you're the one that is placing the hand on the person and you're free of story, then you might remember that you are the person on the table. So by placing your hands on the person on the table, you're actually healing yourself, but only if you're free of the story. And it doesn't work the other way around. If you get on the table, you're automatically submitting to your story.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it was so beautifully profound. And I think it's you know, like you saw, it's all right there in front of your face, like in Mount Kurama, like you're literally in front of your face is the temple of Sonten. It's like right there for you to witness and to feel. And then maybe in a split second, when we have that moment of the understanding of the Tengu and Fudomyo, excuse me, and you know, Bishop Montan and Kenon and Mao San, and then finally Sonten, all the deities of the mountain. As we go through that journey of asceticism, we might recognize a moment of stillness. And I think this is Usui Sensei's great Reiki over his head. He recognized that there is no such thing as Usui Sensei.
Yes.
And then that moment made sense, right?
Yes. And for everyone who's listening that just totally went over your head, it is okay to pause and hit rewind and listen to that again, like 3 or 4 more times. And, you know, I have been following Bruce for a number of years. We've taught together and all these things, and it took me numerous years to catch into all of this stuff. So it's okay if that went over your head. Listen to it again and again and again, and it will start to sink in. And know that if you're interested in the deities of Mount Kurama, I did do a webinar on why did Usui go up to Mount Kurama, and really covered all of the deities. So if you want that resource, please reach out to me. We'll put it in the show notes, because it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating how there is this triple diamond, how there is these 3 sides, these 3 deity that linked the others, and all kind of pointing back to, are we releasing? Are we letting go of our identity? Are we letting go of our attachments? And that is I feel like our soul's work is to do this release. And I think when I was on Mount Kurama, and really since the moment I stepped into the Shugento temple, it was that connection with Fudomyo, who is the deity with this, you know, brilliant fire behind him and this sword, and he's ready to cut your cords, and he's ready to blow everything into his fire. And I just was like, surrender, because everything that we're experiencing is an attachment to a story. And what would life be like if we didn't have that attachment to the story? How was the stories of our past really holding us hostage and in bondage to our previous identities? How is it holding us into our victimhood? Like, how can we release and let go, and let it go to the fire so that we can fully become ourselves? And I always think that's really interesting. I was at a retreat over the summer, and one of the gals was doing a presentation on, it was a shamanic presentation, and she was calling in the directions, and she was like, yeah, my teacher, you know, their shamans are really into fire. And I just got a flashback of my time in Japan. I'm like, you know what? These guys are really into fire. The Goma ceremonies are amazing, and they're really into release, give it to the fire, let it go, release, be born anew into a state of serenity, into a state of satori, into a state of non-attachment. Right.
That's it, you know. And I know that, in both of our conversations there, we've really chucked a lot of stuff out. So I was thinking, you know, how can I summarize it? And I'll summarize it like this. In almost every esoteric practice or understanding, Reiki or meditation, yoga, mindfulness, psychedelics, it does anything out there, every religion, there's always a discussion about the external world being a representation of your internal self. Like the kingdom of heaven lies within. Know me as I am, the name of God, right? It's all inside the self, because you are already Daikomyo. You're already the light of the universe. Okay, so If we can understand that, then this kind of sums it all up. If you imagine that you're standing over one of your clients, you're giving a Reiki session, your hands are on them, and you feel something coming through you, pain, whatever, you have thoughts, you have belief, I open this, balance that, whatever, that's in your mind, because the person on the table is a reflection of you, right? So you're feeling your own internal turmoil. And that's not a criticism. This is like 99.9% of the time that we do this work. I think the goal or the aim should always be, I recognize that I have an attachment and I need to work to let it go. Like in Japan, when we're sitting there practicing Reiki, there is never a conversation about balancing or opening or doing or anything, or chakras even. We just hold space. You feel the turmoil, but who feels the turmoil? Right? It's in the mind of the practitioner who feels the thing, because the person on the table is an extension of the practitioner. So if the practitioner's mind is quiet, then, and the person on the table might very well have something that they're trying to heal. If your mind is quiet, then they're going to be able to release that story through you, because you're not attaching to it. And so that whole thing, the reason why I think it's so significant to go to Japan and to see all of this, is because this is by no means, at least for me, it's by no means any easy feat. It's not easy to be neutral all the time, right? It's impossible.
Right. We're human.
Impossible. We're human, exactly. So the trick is, am I not neutral? Yes, I'm not neutral. Okay, try to be back in neutrality. How's that going to be? Call Fudo Myo, work on the symbols, work on the precepts, chant the precepts if needed, right? Visualize the 3 diamonds, call out to Bishop Montan or Mao San or Kenon or Son Ten, take a break, do whatever you need to do to find that you come back into stillness. That's the aestheticism of it, right?
Yes.
And I think the Western component gets caught in the idea of doing. It gets caught in the experience, but the experience is just an expression of the ego. And so in reality, we're actually trapped by the experience itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always find this, always really interesting. And the fact that I think Westerners, by our culture, it's like we almost need a story that will help us get out of the attachment.
Yeah.
You know, like it's so often a progression of a recognition, awareness first. And so when I went to Japan, it was just everything kind of like I could see it more clearly because of the culture in which I was, because everything is calm there. There is no rush there, at least not in Kyoto, right? So being a part of a place where the frequency and vibration of Mount Kurama gave light to let it go. It doesn't matter. Just let it go. Right. And you come back to this very urban, busy American life, American dream, gotta hustle, like that whole culture that we live in the West isn't really supportive of just let it go. I mean, and so it's like, I love how in my work, it's very much like, let's experience our gifts coming forward. Let's let our subconscious speak to us and what needs to be healed, because then we'll get there in the end. It will take a little longer and that's okay, but we're going to release as we go and recognize the story so that we can release it. So we can release that attachment. And it just seems so much faster when you're in Japan. And I think that contrast was really what ignited me this last summer of going, wow, my brain was so much calmer just being in a different country where I didn't have to constantly be in fear of what was around the corner, about who was with me. Like it was just this, it was so much more attainable just to have a quiet mind.
Yeah.
Recognizing how can I bring that back and cultivate it while I'm living in Montana? What do I need to do to my life circumstances, my home energy environment, the people I talk to, the media that I'm exposed to, all of it. We have a chance to reflect and going, those things aren't serving me anymore. And so I'm going to release and detach from those stories first so that I can have a space where I can self-reflect. What is the attachment I'm really holding on to? Because it's all just Tengu.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I can't stress this enough. It's the natural evolution of anybody on any journey. It's
Yes.
like when you go to kindergarten, you don't know anything. And when you get to first grade, you still don't know anything. And when you get to sixth grade, you think you know everything. And when you get to high school, you recognize you still don't know anything. And you just keep going. You know
Right.
what I mean? So this is why I was saying I think it's the natural progression that Western Reiki has to take. It had to take the roots had to be what they were so that it would actually take hold.
Yes.
But now it's mature enough that it's going to have to graduate. It has to move
Yes.
back to what it was, which is Ansen Ritsume or Daikomyo, or the idea of finding the great white light of the universe inside ourselves.
And I think with that, it's through these shamanic practices of detachment,
Absolutely.
mountain asceticism, doing these practices that really help you detach. And I think
Absolutely.
that's the beauty here. And with that, I would love for you to explain to our listeners the original translation of what Reiki is from this deeper point of view, because I think it helps me even more connect the dots. And I want to gift that to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a rough translation. I mean, if you look this up, the wording might be slightly different, but the general message is the same. So Reiki, Rei is universal and Ki is life force. This is what everybody kind of talks about it as, or universal energy or whatever, right? If Japanese and Chinese and a number of other languages are pictorial by nature. So the kanji in Japanese is a pictorial language. The old original Japanese kanji is pictorial anyways. So when you take the writing of Reiki, as everybody has probably seen in Japanese, and you break it down into each of its components, it roughly translates into this: the rain that falls from the mouth of a female shaman to nourish the earth, from which rice will grow, that we cook via steam to support our being, right? And so I know that's a mouthful, so you can go back and you can rewind it, but I want to explain and break that down very quickly what that means. You may have heard us say earlier this deity of Kannon. Kannon is the thousand-armed Bodhisattva of compassion. She's the goddess of mercy. She's Kuan Lin, the Virgin Mary, the divine feminine. So this is the mouth of the female shaman that we're talking about. And the rain that falls down is the movement of energy as it rains down over the body from the crown or the top of the body, or our ethereal being, as you would like to call it. Doesn't make any difference, right? It's this dynamo effect of energy that's falling back down to the root so that it can rise through the body. Now, the rice is interesting. This little kernel of energy, this is in Asia, right? And so it's their staple product, their staple food source in many ways. And so this rice is symbolic of the chi that is in our body. It's our ability to eat the earth, if you want to think about it like that. It's the ability to take the energy of Mao Sun and rise it up through the body to Bishop Montan, to the universe. Okay. But we have to rise that through the feminine dynamic of Kannon. So we have this really beautiful yin and yang balance at play here. And it's discussed by this steam that is needed to cook the rice. The steam is the fire of the solar plexus and the water of the sacral, spinning like a dynamo into each other. And this is the yin yang balance. The solar plexus is masculine, the sacral is feminine. So the fire evaporates the water and the water quenches the fire, right? And if those two are in balance, then they create steam. And the element of the heart chakra, the next one up from the solar plexus, is air. So what does it mean? It means that if our yin and yang self, our male and female selves, are at balance, which is the real meaning of Seihiki, the second symbol, then we are able to recognize this harmony as it rises into the heart center, which is the seat of the second diamond, which is the seat of our divine feminine, Kannon, the Virgin Mary, which then breeds and breathes life into our entire being, right? If we don't recognize that journey, then something will get out of whack. There'll be too much yin, too much yang, however you want to talk about it, right? You'll be too angry, you'll be too nervous, you'll be too this, too that, or not enough, you'll have too much dampness, whatever. All of these types of things that the East talks about very routinely. then you'll be out of balance. So the idea, once again, is to get everything to move and flow, right? And we have to recognize it's right there, the mouth of a female healer, or sometimes it's called a female shaman, right? Because shamanism means to to cross the veil between the egotistical experience and the esoteric experience. To me, it means that that veil is recognized as transient or permeable. So we can glean information and experience from our true self, our daikomyo self.
Yes.
Right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times during this conversation I've already gotten goosebumps, but I can listen to that over and over and over again. And I make him say it every time. I'm like, tell me again.
Incredible.
I just love this story. Right. Yes.
Incredible.
Yes.
And this is what Usui had to do. You know, like I've done long duration fasts. I've fasted for 21 days in honor of this journey as well. And it's no joke. You have to face all of the turmoil in those two chakras in particular, the sacral and the solar plexus, right? The toxic femininity comes up out of the sacral and the toxic masculinity comes up out of the solar plexus. And when you fast, you face all of that garbage right there and you burn it in the fire of Fudomyo.
Yes.
Right. So this is the whole point. Like, face yourself, try to work through it, try to burn it. And so you can finally then recognize the movement through the three diamonds as it is shown right in front of Kurama Temple.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. I love that. And I think that's why, you know, in our shamanic Reiki programs, you know, we have such a focus on the first three chakras because that's where all of the major healing needs to occur. Right. Absolutely. And so I love that we keep coming. It just keeps showing up like, no, where's the sacral chakra? What's the solar plexus doing? How is this in balance? You know, and I just can't emphasize enough how transformative the Reiki pilgrimage was on my life. And like, I would literally go every year if I could. So,
well, it looks like there's going to be one or two every year. So,
okay, fantastic! You've just signed me up right now. So I'm happy to come on here and announce with Bruce that he's got another one coming up in April. I want to give him the opportunity to tell you about it, but let me tell you, I can't make this one, but it looks so good. It looks so good. I'm like so envious. And here I am in my very human, egotistical self going, not fair. I want to come. How dare you not push this out for me? And the magic that comes into these experiences, I can't even describe, because it's like Bruce is a magnet for the right opportunities, experiences, and people to show up on these pilgrimages. And that is why, you know, he can't necessarily do a huge advance notice because magic can't happen. It would be flat. And so what he is creating is these magical opportunities. And sometimes you don't even know what you're going to get until you get there. Like we got a very rough schedule when I went in May, and literally around every single corner, I'm like, I don't know how you pulled that off. How the heck did you get that to happen? Like, it was constant. And now I'm looking at this current outline and I'm like, it's even better. It's so much deeper. I'm so happy for all of the people who get to join you this April, because it is going to be magical, deep healing. If you've enjoyed this conversation, like, it's this times 100.
I mean, it's very kind of you to say those things. And it's, you know, it's been a lot of work, and you're right. You know, these things that are coming forward on this tour, I'll give a brief overview of the itinerary here from what I can share. There's a lot of magic that's coming forward in this one. So, you know, we are going to open on the first day, like we did on the pilgrimage that you were on, with a private tour of the Shogo-in temple via the current head priest of the temple. However, there's something else coming in that. There's going to be a lot of something else's and people who I can't talk about and all of that, because, and I want to say this is very, very honest and very sincere. When I say there's something else, I'm saying that because it's never happened before. And the people have asked me very specifically to please not be specific about who they are or what it will be, because this is not a commercial endeavor for them. This
Right.
is
You
an
have to remember
endeavor
these
of,
guys are Buddhists. Like they don't want the attention. They don't want the
and
story.
they've
They
never
don't want the
done it.
attachment. Exactly.
Yeah. They've never done this before. But over these past 6, 7, 8 months of talking with them and, you know, sharing my story with the contacts in Japan and building up this, you know, kind of this itinerary, they have agreed to participate on it. So it's going to be absolutely incredible. So on the first day, so we have this private tour of the main Shugen temple in Kyoto, right? We are going to be spending time on subsequent days on Mount Kurama and Mount Hiei. And so Mount Kurama, of course, is where Usui Reiki Roho is from. It's the Sonten sect, a very interesting story about this kind of breakaway sect of Buddhism, which is deeply interwoven, as we've been discussing here, with Usui's journey. And we are going, I'm not going to give any more specifics, but we are going to have an opportunity to learn from the, how do I want to say this? It would essentially be like meeting Thich Nhat Hanh and having a private audience with a very, very revered spiritual Buddhist leader in this particular area. So I don't want to say anything else.
It's like, how can we be as vague as possible?
As vague as possible.
Yes.
Yeah, while also expressing the importance of this. I don't know if this will ever happen again, and that's not hyperbole. It's going to be a complete honor, right? So that's on one time at Mount Kurama. Then at Mount Hiei, we have a similar experience. So they have the Yamabushi are there, right? So these are the practicing Shugen practitioners. And you have these Ajari. The Ajari are the senior teacher monks. And usually there is a strong overlap between the senior Ajari monks and the practice of the Kaihogyo, which is like what the Yamabushi aspire to do. It's like the most ridiculous aspect of mountain asceticism you could ever look at. If you want, for those listening, you can just type in the marathon monks of Mount Hiei, Hiei, and you'll see what I mean. The story is completely ridiculous. So all I can say is that we're meeting with a senior Ajari, I believe. And if that's the case, then the likelihood of them knowing a lot about the Kaihogyo, you can read into that as much as you want, is pretty much confirmed. And we're not just meeting with them. It'll be a private audience in a secluded temple that's not open to the public. And I believe that there's even more to come on that. But I can't say what's happening.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so that's just the day. That's another one of the days. We are then going to have private Goma ceremonies throughout the experience. These fire ceremonies.
Fire ceremonies. Yes.
Yep. And these Goma ceremonies are going to be led. Again, this is just for the group, so it's not open to the public. These are going to be led by senior Shugen priests in the Kyoto area. So I don't want to say who it is, but you can't get much higher in this entire part of Japan. And they're going to be here on the tour with us. And not only are they going to be there for the Goma, but on the 24th of April is a full moon. So we're going to have a private walk through the mountains with these Yamabushi in the full moon in Deep Kurama. And so Deep Kurama is the area, it's like the spiritual heart of Kurama Mountain. You know, Kurama Mountain is where Usui Sensei had his enlightenment, of course, right? But there is a trove of religious significance behind the mountain. And I wouldn't be surprised that the fable of Usui Sensei having his enlightenment on Mount Kurama, everybody says he was there. This is the story, and I'm not discrediting that in the slightest. But there's so much happening behind the mountain that I also wouldn't be surprised if things were taking place back there.
Absolutely.
So we're going to be experiencing all of that with senior Yamabushi priests in private, like hiking through. And Christine, I know you've seen them. You know, they have the huge conch shells, and they'll be blowing those as we go through to alert the Tengu and everything. These type of experiences they've never been offered before on any tour. Any Reiki tour, any spiritual tour, none of this has been put together before. And to experience all of this, we're going to be staying in the deep Kurama area in traditional Japanese homestays. Christine, you remember, it's going to be very similar to where we were, right?
Yes.
And so
yes.
it's building
like
on,
my
on
dream,
a
you
lot of
guys. It's my dream. Like I am literally over here fantasizing, how can I get to Ecuador, to Japan and make it work? Because I don't think you can get better than this. I really think, I mean, I don't know how I can emphasize, like, it is worth the credit card payments. It is worth just saying, you know what, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If do what you need to do to make it happen. And, you know, I know for me, like, it was such a transformative experience, and I'm getting the tip of the iceberg of what Bruce is talking about here. Everything that he's describing is my fantasy of the perfect Reiki pilgrimage. So like, I'm like, okay, this is amazing. So I'm going to be putting in the show notes how to register. He's got early bird special going on until the end of January.
Right, end of January. Yep.
And,
and on the link that Christine's going to share, you can please take a moment and read the full itinerary. There's special guests that I'm not mentioning here. There's special guests that I'm not even, that have just been confirmed with me, that are amazing, that I'm not putting in the itinerary yet, because this is, you know, this is, it's going to be incredible. I don't know.
And I think like, that's the thing. It's like, when you're connecting with these Buddhist monks, they don't want the honor of their name going on promotional materials. And we have to remember that as Westerners, this is a different approach. They don't want to be highlighted. That's against their practice, right? And so part of this is like, look, I'm verifying. If Bruce says these people are showing up and they're going to be amazing, like, trust him. Like, the real deal is going to happen. So love that. Is there anything else that they should know about the pilgrimage that you're going to be offering?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be clear, and it says this very clearly on the itinerary as well, that, and it was the same exact thing on your tour, right?
Yes.
And you saw how it came out. This is always a dynamic tour, right? So things can change and things can move, and we're talking about priests who are in their, you know, late 90s. So we never know if they're going to be there, if they will be. They're already signing up for it. They're saying yes, right? But just please everybody know that this is a dynamic event. However, I feel that even if part of the tour was what people experienced, you're going to leave being like, this is insane. Like, imagine if you had the opportunity to commit to, everybody who's listening probably loves Reiki. So imagine if you had an opportunity to go on a Reiki tour, and then you also recognize that on that tour, you had one private audience with somebody of Thich Nhat Hanh's caliber.
Yeah.
Right. And what I mean by that is these are monks that are revered as living deities in Japan. Right. Yeah. So, you know, that in and of itself, people would be like, are you kidding me? Like,
right.
But the way the itinerary looks right now is we will have 7 days and 6 nights together. And something like this is going to be happening on almost every day of the tour. It's going to be incredible.
Right. I think I remember going to the first day and going to the Shugendo temple and going, if this is it, if this is all it was worth the price. You know what I mean? Like, it just kept blowing my mind, and you've taken it to a whole other level. So I know I'm now sounding just ridiculous because I love it. I love it. So
so I want to add something else, a couple of points very, very quickly. First off, this is the best time to visit Japan in the past 30 years. This is the cheapest the yen has ever been in the past 30 years. When you were there with me last time, and when I was in Japan just last year, the yen was 15% more valuable than it is today. So that means the exact same expense once we're in the country is 15% less than it was last year. Right?
So to put that in retrospect, my father and I could eat as much sushi as we wanted, and it was about $35 American.
That's right. So now it's going to be, so that would be 17. So now that's going to be like 13.50.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, and you're talking about world class food
Yes.
here, like
Yes.
ridiculous, beautiful sushi, not like stuff that you're getting at a convenience store or whatever. It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
And so that in and of itself, like once you're there, boots on ground, everything is going to be the cheapest that it's been in Japan for the past 30 years. It's perfect. Second to this, I know that like what Christine was saying about it's in April, maybe people haven't traveled before, maybe it's difficult or whatever. Japan is the easiest country to travel in. It's the safest place on the planet. I mean that with
Hands down.
pretty much no hyperbole at all.
Hands down. I felt
Yeah.
safer there than in the mountains of Montana. Let me tell you, like
Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
felt safer in my life than I was in Kyoto. So
Yeah. You don't need a visa if you're coming on the tour page. You can see a link that I put where all the countries who don't need visas. The majority of listeners to this podcast, I'm assuming, are probably going to be, you know, in Europe or in Asian countries or in the Americas. And most of those countries, you don't need a visa. So you just get on a flight and you're going to be met right away with the group. And then from there, all you have to do is have an amazing, life-changing experience and just sink in to this understanding of Reiki, and not only Reiki, but esoteric Buddhism, and not only esoteric Buddhism, but in reality, sink into a story that is a grander narrative of who you really are. And so imagine being in this whole experience where everything around you is trying to get you to see your own daikomyo inside of yourself. And then, I have them every time I go. I know you had them,
Yes,
Christine. People on the tour
absolutely.
were having them all the time. You sit there like we were staring. Remember at Toji Temple, you would stare at the all of those crazy old beautiful statues until they became you,
Yes.
right? And it's just like
Cosmic experience.
it's a cosmic experience of a journey into the truth of who we really are. And I think that's made so much easier, like what you so beautifully said, when you're outside of your routine, outside of your comfort zone, and you're surrounded in an environment that literally everything is about turning into the self and recognizing the peace and the beauty and the love and the harmony that's there. And not only is all of that happening, but you're going to be learning from like the most senior people in all of those fields, in all of esoteric Buddhism, in the Sonten sect, in the Shugendo world. All of them are going to be there, and we're going to be able to learn from them. So it's like,
yeah,
I can't
absolutely.
wait. I literally can't wait. Yeah.
It's going to be amazing. Yes. So thank you so much, Bruce, for coming on and sharing all of this wisdom with us. I love these types of conversations. Know that in the show notes, you'll not only have the link to Bruce's next Reiki pilgrimage in April, you'll also have my webinar to the why did Usui go up to Mount Kurama? So if you're interested in the deities, going a little further, we'll find that there. If you're interested in shamanic Reiki and really understanding that, we're going to be including a lot of this information in our upcoming Soul Rising Shamanic Reiki training, because it's going to be learning Reiki from the lens of shamanic, from the lens of shamanism. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can take your practice deeper. And we want to invite you to continue to do that self-healing work, to continue to dive in, to continue to understand the true meaning of Reiki and what that looks like. So thank you, Bruce, for coming on today. I cannot wait to hear all about it. I will definitely be sharing some photos from my Reiki pilgrimage from back in May. And if you guys have any questions, you can reach out to either Bruce Taylor or myself. And if I can't answer the basic questions, I'll definitely send you over to Bruce. So don't hesitate to reach out. We love to support you in this way. And keep doing it, Bruce. I want to come.
Thanks so much. No, it's a pleasure, and it's an honor to be able to put these things together. You know, I love doing it, and it's a journey for me as well, right? I mean, everything's a reflection, right? So as we all go and discover this together, we'll see discovery in each other as our own discovery as well. So I'm humbled to be able to offer it to everybody, and I can't wait. It's going to be incredible.
Yay. Yeah. All right. Thank you
so much.